Hey, hey. And I was second actually. Today it actually worked getting my OBS to stream on Twitch. Hey AJ, thank you for moderating my stream. Good evening, and yes, you were first. This is why you are wearing the first badge in the chat. Very nice. Well, the game takes some time to load. Actually, there was an indicator promised now that you can see the progress when loading in the game. Aha, here we are. Dovetail and focus, and please listen to the disclaimer that got kicked out of this opening sequence. We are talking about playing computer games, and please leave the real-world trains and railway installations to the professionals. Hey Spectre, nice to see you on the chat. Actually, I picked up your suggestion, and I'm doing a video about Bremshundertstel, this weird thing that they have in Germany to determine how fast the train can go in a certain situation. So I try to put something together, and I want to do this while playing a scenario in or on the Schnellfahrstrecke Kassel-Würzburg, and it will be a scenario with the Dispolok, the Baureihe 182, the Euro Sprinter, also called Taurus in Austria. And the fun thing is that this locomotive is actually rated and is allowed to run 230 under LZB, obviously, because no train can go faster than 160 in Germany if it is only running guided by wayside signals. And now let's try to find it here. It is called gaining mass. I almost put in the indicator here putting on weight, because I thought this was the name of the scenario, but luckily I checked that it is called gaining mass. And maybe this is just what we are trying to talk about today. Hey Theodoros! Very nice to see you on the stream. And you've got a first badge too. That is cool. So this scenario involves that we are running a light engine from, I think it is Fulda to Würzburg, and then we are connecting to a fully set up freight train there. And then we are going back double traction with two Dispoloks. Baureihe 182. Good morning. Today we'll be running this locomotive light down to Würzburg. That was short. Let's see where we are. Message log. To aid in the transportation of a heavy freight train, which is to be delivered to Fulda. Alright. Yeah, let's set up our locomotive here. They want us to move the reverser to forward. Turn on the lights, normal beams. And we have to actually set up. Let's stand up for that to make it nice. Here it is only neutral signal lights, but we want taillights because we're running light and headlights. Lights on both ends. Let's sit down and check if they worked out. Yes, we have the 3 white lights at the front and the 2 red lights at the rear. That is called the signal ZG1 for the front and ZG2 for the rear. I'll switch off the Ebola screen because there is not much happening there anyway. Since we're running at night, I will have this on night mode and a bit less bright. It wants us to turn on the wipers. The wipers are on the panel down here on the right. This is the left side with the AFB, and since we are down here and turning on the wipers, we can also, since we are running light, move the PZB mode switch to O. As a light engine, we are definitely in a position to run this locomotive in PZB mode O. Then we need to turn it on. Turning on PZB is a bit weird here because we are using this switch that says PZB Betrieb Operation and Nothalt Emergency Stop. So we're putting it from Nothalt to Betrieb to actually use it. Let's see if, yeah, the correct indicator is on. So we can run it in PZB O. But since we want to run it with 230, we need LZB, and it is isolated LZB. We have to hit this button to unisolate it, and here is also the switch that turns on the CFA on this locomotive. Train setup. Before we're releasing the brakes, I would want to use the AFB. AFB switch is on the left side here, as we can see. I used the keyboard short to turn it on, because switching through the camera perspective is always a bit weird. And then we are setting the AFB speed, and we can see that even when we are releasing the brakes now, the AFB will hold us in place with a bit. In general, it is a bit weird with the night lighting here on the dials. You can definitely see it much better when you have some lights on them. But anyways, so we can see a green distance signal VR 1, so that we can safely start our journey. And the thing is, we need to put the throttle. You can here see all 4 driving motors operating. We can release from the starting program so that we can actually go faster than the 40. Yeah, and when running light, this locomotive accelerates really nicely. Still got to contain ourselves a bit. Lokzug is the term used there. Lokzug we would use if there is more than one locomotive in the consist. So, because I was reading the chat, I got the Zwangsbremsung because I probably did not acknowledge the VR2 telling us that we have to expect to slow down to 60 at the next signal. So we have to come to a standstill, push the LZB PZB release button, then we are back, throttle to 0. Let's see if we can get any power. Yes, we can get power. No, don't be sorry, it's okay. The thing is, I cannot release from the starting program now. You can see 70 and 85 flashing alternatingly, and the yellow lamp for the 1000 Hertz monitoring is on. So we are at the moment limited to 40. Restricted monitoring. Sometimes I say start program for it, but it's actually a restricted monitoring because we stopped here in the 1000 Hertz monitoring that we missed, so we cannot release. And Lokzug, what I was trying to say is, if we have more than one locomotive in a consist and no cars, no wagons, like one locomotive carrying or towing a couple of more locomotives from A to B. We have that on Ruhrsieg Nord, for example. that you're running Lokzüge or you have it on the right main line sometimes. Now I can finally release and speed up to 60. Here we can see the HP2 with the ZS3 showing 6. And then a VR1 indicating that the next signal when we are through the interlockings will be clear. Not announcing that the next signal will show a limit to 100. What I think I remember properly. So, back to the Lokzug thing. I think Lokzug is only used if there are at least 2 locomotives in this consist. Well, what word would we use if we are just using one engine running light? Maybe it's a Lokfahrt or something as Einzellokfahrt. So, we are through the interlockings. Theoretically, we are allowed to accelerate to the 140, but as I said, the next signal has a ZS310, limiting us to 100 through the next switch here. What was not announced, but, well, here we go. This is the switch for the 100, and after that we can actually accelerate properly. Not yet to the 200, because we are still running under PZB, not LZB. LZB is on, we can see the B indicator being lit, but not so the umlaut indicator, the Ü indicator. So LZB is listening to signals, but it has not received a signal yet. There was a dark distance signal with only the white indicator light on. Not entirely sure if this would happen on in a situation like this. Probably not. Even if there is a Dunkelschaltung, a dark switching of the signals during LZB, it should only happen during LZB, and we are not running under LZB yet. So I'm accelerating to 160 at the moment, until we pick up the LZB signal. Maybe I turn down the wiper to 1. It is snowing a bit, but not so heavily. Partial block and PZB? Do not think so. Should not be dark. No, should not be dark. I did not want to put it that harshly, but I think there is no reason for the signal being dark. That is the Schnarre for the LZB, the signal that we are picking up. LZB signals now. The Ü indicator is lit, and we have an indication that we are allowed to go 230 now. And clear track ahead for the next 9.9 kilometers. Schnarre is a nice German word which is too rarely used. Well, yes, that is true. And I do not really know a good translation into English. But, well, everybody can hear the sound and probably can imagine why it is called Schnarre. It is not a horn, it is not a bell, it is a Schnarre. ICE train on ICE snowy scenery is one of my favorite sights to behold. Oh, that is nice. We will have a couple of them here, I guess. Maybe it will stop snowing later, but in the beginning we have that, and we should encounter a couple of ICEs. I think this is something that is actually fun for real-world train drivers as well. Racing a single locomotive like this with 230 along the line. And it is getting day. The clouds are already purple. In real life we are still waiting for the first snow of the year. At least I am. AJ probably not so much. For Kara, yeah. Kara will love the snow. One weird thing is actually we are running on a German train that obviously has a SIFA, Sicherheitsfahrschaltung, for a vigilance device, but when I activate it, the caption to the right says vigilance pedal pressed and released. Like on a British train. It should say SIFA, shouldn't it? Yes, AJ is hoping for snow for Kara. And I am hoping for snow for the both of us. And for Chile obviously as well. In the tunnel we probably do not need the wiper. And since this DLC has not been updated to Train Sim World 4 scoring system, we won't get docked for not using the wiper in the tunnel. So AFB will keep us at a constant 230. It will apply power if I put the throttle to some setting higher than 0, so, and then it will use the amount of throttle that I allow or less, and it will activate the, at least the electric brake, the dynamic brake on its own. Theodoro says speed limit for light engine is 230 km per hour. I've heard from other channel that in UK light engine is limited due to having less brake contact point with the rail. Yes, this locomotive has a top speed of 230, and at least I have not found anything saying me that or telling me that 230 on a light engine for this engine is not possible to go. So even with cars attached to this locomotive, if the cars are allowed to go that fast, then we would be able to go that fast as long as we are running under LZB. Flo, hi! Found your YouTube account a couple of months ago. Just wanted to say thank you for all your videos and streams. I learned so much from your tutorials that Train Sim World is now fun to drive outside of Germany without a HUD. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to hear that. This is while we are doing this. I think the game is so much more enjoyable if you understand more of what is happening, and I'm always trying to dig as deep as we can do that as dilettantes. So I'm very happy to hear that. Yeah, and in Great Britain they have special rules for trains that are running, locomotives running light or consists of locomotives alone. I think I have mentioned a couple of them in the video about the freight settings in the UK. And they are usually, most of the time, limited to 75 miles per hour. But obviously they don't have LZB in, at least on most lines they don't have. I think they checked out LZB on some line or some section, but it's obviously much too expensive. Now LZB is telling us something new is coming up. We can see the zeros here. That means stop is required, but not within the next 9.9 kilometers, so we can safely go on. Running downhill at the moment, so the AFB is just applying a little bit of power. And now it already changed again, so whatever told LZB that we have to stop in 10 kilometers ahead changed, cleared, so we are allowed to go back to 230. So as a freight train, obviously we would not be allowed to go, same thing again, 230, because the cars are slowing us down, even if we managed to achieve a PZBO rating. So freight trains in Germany are limited to 120 kilometers by law. So the law, federal law, states that no freight train in Germany can go faster than 120 unless it gets a special permit from the Eisenbahnbundesamt, what is only for experimental trains or something like this. So obviously with freight wagons attached, we could not go 230. With passenger cars attached, there is not actually a reason for us not to go 230 if the cars were rated to go 230. But I don't know any passenger car actually that is rated for 230. They are typically rated at 160 max. And everything that goes faster is ICE. And obviously we are not pulling an ICE with our Taurus here. Don't know if anywhere else in Germany there are Eurosprinter locomotives that tow passenger cars faster than 160. It is possible that something like this exists. I would have to look that up. I think the IC cars can run 200 kilometers per hour. Railjet, yeah, I was thinking of Railjet, that this works, but I don't know what speeds they can go. And the IC cars can go 200 kilometers per hour. Maybe. But I have, at least to my knowledge, there is no IC train in Germany that uses a Eurosprinter locomotive with those cars. Maybe with a Vectron or with a Trax 3 and 187. I think there are some IC trains that run with a Trax 3 locomotive, and I don't know how fast they can go. Maybe an interesting thing to look into. The old 103. That is the Rheingold train, no? Wasn't there a freight train with a Vmax of 140 or 160? I'm not sure, but I think it was the Intercargo Express. Yes, this is what I meant with experimental trains. For experimental trains on special routes, you can get special permits from the Eisenbahnbundesamt, the German Federal Railway Authority, and then you can go faster. But this is still an exception for experimental trains, and I think it has been discontinued, no? The old 103, yes. So I think before the ICE era there have been trains of that sort. And how fast is the rail shade going, Theodorus? Do you know that? $230. Well, so they are actually making use of the top of this locomotive. Yeah, I think I watched a video on YouTube by some real-world train driver who drove this locomotive, a Euro Sprinter or something of that class at least, from Nuremberg to Munich on the ICE track with a 200 or 230. Light, obviously. Limited by the Taurus locomotive as well, as far as I know. Alright. Yeah, guys, that's really interesting to discuss here. As you know, I am more a regulations guy and not so much the tech guy, and least of all the numbers guy. So I'm happy for all the input. So how are we doing, by the way? Approaching Würzburg, still a bit to go. But maybe when we get out of the tunnel again, this is a good time to cut in the first part of the presentation, maybe. So out of the tunnel, it's almost day. And let's have the first part of the presentation here. Is it on? Yes, it is on. Bremshundertstel was requested, sometimes translated with brake percentage. If you translate it word by word, it is brake hundredths. 100th and more hundredths. And brake hundredths is the word by word translation for that. And why do we have such a weird thing in the German system? Not only in the German system, but predominantly in the German system. The problem that needs to be solved, and why we have this, is this: a train is running along a line, and somewhere on the line there is a red signal, so the train needs to stop. Obviously we can't do the same what we would do in road traffic, just start braking as soon as we see the red light, because we would never be able to stop the train in front. This is why we typically get a distant signal, like here on the KS system, for example, a yellow signal that is telling us that the next signal will be red and we have to stop. And then we have the distance between the distance signal and the main signal to actually come to a stop, to bring our train to a stop. In the German system, we have typically a fixed distance between the distance signal and the main signal, that is the regular braking distance, called like this because it is the distance that a train needs to be able to stop in when it gets the warning to stop in front of a red signal. And this is on main railways 1,000 meters, 1 kilometer typically. It can be shorter, can be a bit more, but typically the regular braking distance is this 1,000 meters, and the whole system is coined on this distance of 1,000 meters. On secondary railways it can be shorter, 700, 400, 300 meters even, but that always slows down the maximum speed. And the question is that we need to know what is the maximum speed for our train, that the train can still safely stop in front of the red signal as soon as it gets a warning to do so, because the whole warning would not make a lot of sense if the train wasn't in a position to actually slow down and stop in front of the signal. So how can we determine the maximum speed that the train can go so that this is still safe and that the train can stop in the regular braking distance of 1,000 meters? And for that, can we determine a value that represents the deceleration capability of a specific train that we have here, so that we can calculate the speed? Because obviously the maximum speed that the train can go depends on a couple of parameters. That is the brake equipment that we have on the train, that is the settings of this equipment, if there are more than one setting possible, and obviously the train is sometimes more heavy, sometimes it is less heavy, depends on how many passengers are there and what is loaded in the cars. And obviously this will have some sort of influence on the maximum speed that we can go, so that we are still able to stop within the regular braking distance. Obviously the gradient also is important. If we're running uphill, we need less distance to slow down, because the drag will be intensified by the gradient. Not so when we're running downhill towards the main signal, then we obviously need more distance to slow down our train. And then the train composition is sometimes an important factor for determining how fast we can go, because if we have a heavy freight train, it is no good if the tip of the train is braking hard and the end of the train is not braking so hard and is running into the train, or the other way around, and then we can rip apart our train. So these parameters and more are relevant for how fast we can go, so that we are still able to slow down and stop in front of a red signal within the regular braking distance. So what was the idea almost 100 years ago? I think it was the year 1936 when people came up with the idea, we just test our trains. We apply the brakes to the max and then see how much distance the train runs until it gets to a stop, and then we compare all the other vehicles with one standardized trains. And for that, typically, and this is still done like this, one locomotive is accelerating the vehicle in question on a track, and at a certain point it gets uncoupled. The locomotive pulls away, and then as soon as the car, for example, or another locomotive gets uncoupled, what happens? The brake pipe typically gets drained all of a sudden and the brakes come full on, and then the wagon, the car, grinds to a halt somewhere. And by this we can determine the stopping distance for this particular vehicle. And in 1936 they just took the most heavy train that they had at the time, some passenger train with 15 heavy passenger cars, and they did this more or less and measured the distance and said a train that stops in this distance has Bremshundertstel brake percentage 100%. And every vehicle that stops in a shorter distance will have a brake percentage Bremshundertstel of more than 100. And every vehicle and every train that needs more distance to stop will have less than 100% brake percentage Bremshundertstel. That was the core idea of Bremshundertstel and how it was initiated. So it is a very empiric thing to do, to uncouple your vehicle and see how long it goes until it finally grinds to a halt, to a stop. And how this is done actually, and how it is transferred and calculated to Bremshundertstel then, or to braked weight in this one, is set out in the UIC leaflet 544-1. What I do not have, unfortunately, so I cannot really tell you how it is done. It is most complicated. Obviously, you can see that you need to tell people at what speed the uncoupling happens, and how much load you put in, and how you calculate a difference in meters into different brake weight then, and so on. But the general idea, I think it is quite graspable. We have our reference train and say the distance that this train took to stop is 100, and every vehicle that stops in a shorter distance will have a higher brake percentage rating, and every vehicle that needs more distance will have a lower brake percentage rating. The important thing is that we are comparing emergency brake applications, or in German Schnellbremsung. At this point, I know it is not entirely correct to translate emergency brake application with Schnellbremsung. In Germany, you would call every emergency brake application that is initiated by the driver a Schnellbremsung. A fast brake application, well, you would rather call an emergency brake application that is initiated by a passenger by pulling the emergency brake handle as a Notbremsung, what is more or less the translation of emergency brake application better. And then Zwangsbremsung will be the emergency brake application, penalty brake, that is initiated by a safety system on the train, for example. But all of this, the same idea is we drain the brake pipe, we cut the fast braking circuit if we do not have a brake pipe anymore on a more modern train, and the brakes go full on, so that we are actually using the full potential, and we are cutting out all the differences that come in with what the driver is doing if he is setting the steps of the brake slowly up and whatever. We are just typically cutting the brake pipe and draining the brake pipe as fast as it goes in this procedure here. And then we use level ground so that we cut out all the influence of a gradient. And by that, by using the rules and the UIC leaflet 544-1, we can determine the deceleration capability of a certain vehicle. What do we do with the mass? Obviously, the same vehicle with the same brakes, with the same brake settings, will run longer if it has a lot of load in it, whereas it will probably stop in a shorter distance as long as it is empty, for example. How can we deal with this? Do we have to put a rating on the car that says with this load it has this brake percentage and so on? Not really. The good thing is that the correlation between the vehicle mass and the stopping distance is more or less a linear thing. So if we double the mass of the vehicle, then we will more or less have doubled, or with a different factor, the stopping distance. So this linear correlation between those two things allow us to neutralize the mass by dividing our braked weight through the mass. So if we want to have one figure, one value that tells us how capable this vehicle is of slowing down, of deceleration, the deceleration capability, then we can take the train mass below the line and put our artificial value, the brake force that we determined by those tests here, on top of it, and we divide the brake force per mass. So per every ton that this vehicle weighs, it can be slowed down with the same ratio, right? So, and this is the deceleration capability that we have. So train mass is obviously given in tons, sometimes called train weight, what is not entirely correct, but on Earth, as long as we stay on Earth, it is okay to do that. And this figure here, the brake force that we determine here and determine along the lines of the UIC leaflet 544-1, is called in German the Bremsgewicht, what translates to brake weight, what is also given in tons. And why do we give that in tons? Because tons here neutralizes, and we have a figure that has no unit anymore. And this is our brake percentage. Is it a percentage because we have the brake force divided by the mass of the train, obviously. The more heavy the train goes, the deceleration capability decreases, obviously, but the brake force still stays the same. And this is the value that we call in German the Bremshundertstel then. And to make it actually Hundertstel, we multiply this or the outcome of this division by 100. If not, we would end up with a figure like 1.14 or 0.68 or something. And to neutralize this period in this figure, we multiply it by 100 and round it down. And then we end up with figures of 66, what is more or less 66% compared to the reference train, or with 172, what is 172% compared to the reference train, or even more than 200 like modern trains have. And this gives us a value for a specific vehicle at a specific brake setting. So this brake force, the brake weight, Bremsgewicht, we can just write on the side of the vehicle so everybody knows how good this vehicle can decelerate. And independently of how heavy the vehicle is actually loaded. This is something that the train composer has to do in a calculation of its own. He has to read the figure here. This is the brake weight of the car and divide it by the mass to determine the brake percentage for this specific vehicle. This is the idea. Brake weight ends up in brake percentage as soon as we divide it by the weight of the train, or the mass of the train, and multiply it by 100. So far, so good. The brake percentage, the Bremshundertstel, tell us the deceleration capability for a specific vehicle at a specific brake rating with a specific load already. Now we have talked about at the specific brake setting. We all know that there are more than one brake setting typically on a vehicle. G and P and R, and more arcane things like R plus MG or something like this, or even P2, what I've not seen in the game so far. What does it do? Different brake settings enable the user of a vehicle to change the behavior of the brake equipment, make it more effective or make it less effective. And those different settings are standardized, and we need to have a look at them to know how to take the brake settings into account when we're actually calculating the relevant Bremshundertstel of our vehicles. So what brake settings, Bremsstellungen, are there? We have G for Güter in German, goods in English. We have P for Personen in German, passengers in English. So it's quite nice because the words in German and in English start with the same letter. And we have R for rapid braking. And how do those are the three basic settings that you can find on brake force selectors on your vehicle. Sometimes on freight cars you can only find GP. On locomotives, typically in the train sim world environment, you can find GPR. On cars it can be still different, but those three are the basic settings. And how are they different? One thing is the timing between G and P. G brakes act quite slow, so the air that goes into the brake cylinder takes its time. So we are filling the brake cylinders rather slowly. We have a rather small hole for the air to go into the brake cylinders. We are filling them slowly. What is okay on heavy freight trains, because we don't want to burn our brakes too fast. So the timing of goods brakes, of G setting brakes, is rather slowly, whereas on passenger trains we can apply the brakes faster. We are directing the air into the brake cylinder at a faster rate, so that they fill faster, attack faster. And on rapid it is still the same, so it does not increase anymore. So there is one increase in the speed that the brake cylinders are filled from G to P, and at this rate it stays. So you can sometimes read something else on forums or whatever, but that is not true. There is no difference in the timing between P and R brakes. So why are there different settings for P and R then? Okay, there must be more than this one parameter, and this is predominantly the maximum pressure. We can fill our brake cylinder up to a certain pressure, and then we can fill it even more, increase the pressure in the brake cylinder, and this will increase the pressure of the brake shoe against the wheel or the caliper against the brake disc, and this will increase the brake force. So at G, obviously, the maximum pressure is rather low, whereas for P setting, it is still rather low. It is still the same setting. So G and P setting does not differentiate in the maximum pressure. The maximum pressure that we achieve in our brake cylinder is the same at G and P, but the timing is different. We fill the cylinder faster to the same maximum pressure to apply the brake force faster. Not more brake force, but we applied faster. Whereas in the change to R, we are going to a higher pressure. Not with every brake application, but after the train is traveling quite fast. So after a certain speed threshold has been superseded, then the pressure, the air brake will increase the pressure in the brake cylinders to a higher maximum. So that for G we have slow timing, low pressure. For P we have fast timing, low pressure, and R we have fast timing and high pressure in the end. So those are the three basic settings that differentiate between themselves with two parameters, and like this. So from G to P it goes faster, and from P to R it is going to a higher maximum pressure. The P2 setting that you sometimes find is a setting that can only happen on locomotives. Some locomotives have a P2 setting, what is something between P and R. It has the same timing as P and R brakes and a maximum pressure that is between both P and R. So it increases the maximum pressure, but less so than with R brakes, to a moderately high maximum pressure. Also only if a certain speed threshold has been reached. But there are more brake settings that can be selected on some vehicles, like P plus MG. I put it a bit out of the way here because this MG is for the magnetic track brake, the Magnetschienenbremse, that we have sometimes looked at in the videos so far, but we have not had a video that was dedicated to the magnetic drag brake. This is a brake system that does not have to do anything with the air brakes. This is why it is a plus and it is moved out of the way, because this does not change the behavior of the air brakes at all. The only thing that happens, especially with emergency brake applications, Schnellbremsungen, Notbremsungen, Zwangsbremsungen, every time we need the train to stop as fast as it is possible, we add the magnetic drag brake to the air brake, and then a magnetized metal shoe will be pressed against the rail to slow down the train even more, so that we do not only have the friction between the wheel and the rail, but between this magnetic drag brake shoe and the rail in addition. So this comes on top of it, and we have this brake setting that allows the train to use this magnetic drag brake. It is traditionally only used in emergency brake applications. There are some situations where the driver can add the magnetic drag brake if need be, also outside of emergency brake applications. But typically you would not use it for normal service brake applications, only if need be. The same exists for the R setting as well, so obviously no big difference. We have the R setting here and the magnetic drag brake if necessary allowed. And the last one, the R setting with the WB, what is the Wirbelstrombremse, the eddy current brake, what is a different additional brake to the air brake. Also nothing to do with the air brake, but we add, if necessary, the eddy current brake. We have a video about the eddy current brake on the ICE3, and to my knowledge, the ICE3 is the only train that is using the eddy current brake, at least in Germany, because it is a quite complex thing to use. It was traditionally used only in Schnellbremsszenarien, in emergency brake application, but for a couple of years now it is also used for service brake applications, as far as I know, but does not have to do anything with the air brake system, but changes the brake behavior of the train and therefore modifies our brake force and brake percentage on this train. Still not done. How do we know which of the brake settings we are supposed to use on our vehicle? For that we have to look in our timetable, because the timetable typically tells us which Bremsart is required for this trip that we are supposed to run on, and from the Bremsart, from the brake mode, we can then deduce what brake setting we need on our vehicle. And the general rule for this is we should always use the most effective setting that is allowed by the timetable and the accompanying rules. So if we have a timetable that is set out in brake mode G, then the only thing that we can do is set our brakes to G. That is quite simple. But if we have a timetable that is set out in P/R, then it depends on what kind of train we have. Still, the general rule is we should use the most effective setting that we have on our vehicles. So if we have R, we should use R. If we have R plus MG, we should use this. If we have only P, well, then we should use P. But there are special rules, especially for heavy freight trains. This is the thing that we sometimes have to take into account, that we cannot just brake every vehicle with its maximum force, because then we can create some forces inside the train, that parts of the train are braking heavier than other parts of the train, so that the train can be pulled apart, stretched too much and rip apart, or can be bunched together too heavily. So if the end of the train is running in the front of the train, because the front of the train is braking harder than the rear of the train, then we can have too much bunching in the middle, and this can more or less push the middle cars off the rails, so that we have a derailment there, and this we don't want to happen. So there are special rules for how to set up the brakes in a heavy freight train, and there are rules for how to set up the brakes if some brakes are not working on some cars, for example. So this gets quite complicated very fast. We have our video about how to set up G and P brakes on freight cars depending on how heavy the whole consist is. This is our PZBM or don't break it if it ain't fixed video. So if you want to hear about that or rehear about that, then I would suggest watching this video. Typically, we should use the most effective setting unless the rules say otherwise, and then we can also be forced to set some brakes to setting G, even if we are running under P and R. We will come back to this later. This setting R plus eddy current brake we can only use if the timetable tells us to use brake mode WB, but this is only for our ICE3. Typically you have P and R, and then you have to apply the rules to see what brake setting that is used. And what brake setting is used will determine the brake weight that we can put into our equation. So to round this up a bit, we wanted to find a value that we can paint or write on our vehicle so that everyone that puts this vehicle into a train can see what brake weight this locomotive or this vehicle has, so that they can put it in a list and calculate the whole brake percentage of this train. And this looks quite complicated again. This is the Bremsanschrift on the Vectron, the Baureihe 193 that we have in the game by now. And let's look what we have here. On the left, this figure here, 89 tons, is the mass of our locomotive, the so-called Dienstgewicht. This is what we put underneath the line. This is the mass that we have to slow down on the locomotive. Locomotives have a fixed weight or mass here typically because they don't get loaded. They won't have any load. And then we can see our settings, G, P and R. It reappears here and it gives us different figures in tons telling us the brake weight of the locomotive in setting G, in setting P, in setting R. The one here down here, this is the symbol for the hand brake, the Federspeicherbremse, spring-loaded brake. That is not important for driving, but this is important if you want to stable your train in a gradient. Then you need to know how much weight or mass the hand brake can hold. So for running our train, for calculating the Bremshundertstel, we need those figures here. And then we need to know how to switch our brake equipment, to what setting to switch it. That was the video about don't break it until it is fixed. And then you need to look it up here and see, okay, if I can set my locomotive to P, then my brake weight for this locomotive is 95 tons. If I can set it to R, what only works with passenger trains, then I can set it to this. And whoop, what is coming here? Well, we'll see. What is... Oh yeah, it is the Vectron. I actually have a tag for it. What is it up here? Here reappears P plus E, R plus E, R plus E 160, and three different numbers written in red. You can see, well, it is always more complicated than you started out with. This plus E is telling us the weight or the brake weight that we can take into account if we can also factor in the dynamic brake or elektrische Bremse on this vehicle. We can typically do this if we have at least, I think, 3 more cars with working air brakes in our train apart from our leading locomotive. Then we can also take this E into account. So with brake setting P, we can take the E into account, the dynamic brake, then we end up with 105 instead of 95. Same for R. Instead of 135, we can put 157. So this is with dynamic brake if we are allowed to factor in the dynamic brake according to the rules. What is that now? R plus E and R plus E 160 and even a higher weight. This is an increased brake weight for fast trains with very effective brakes on the cars. So this is for locomotives that can go 160. This is a traditional thing. In former days, the passenger train locomotives were limited to 140, and then there came up locomotives that were able to go 160, but for that we needed special brake equipment on the cars, especially at least magnetic track brakes. And this ended up in the passenger vehicles being quite effective in slowing down the train, and this on the other end reflected back on the brake performance on the locomotive. So if we have a train of that kind, I think it is 170 brake percentage plus in the train alone, then we can use this figure instead of the figure below. You can see nothing is easy, but everything is more or less understandable if you look at it a bit more. What is that figure now in brackets with this symbol here? It is lower. It is also applicable to R, but it is applicable if the locomotive is dead, if the abgerüstet, im abgerüsteten Zustand in German. So it is braking. It is using its brake equipment, its air brake, but it is, it is switched off, to call it like this in a simple way. Then we have less braked weight for this locomotive. And then you need to know the setup of your train to see which one of those figures you can take into account for your Vectron that is pulling the train. This other example comes from a Baureihe 766 Dosto passenger car. Here it is not plain to see. I tried to improve the picture quality a bit. It was a screenshot from the game. This is the lever. This yellow thing here is the lever for setting the brake setting. And you can see that here is the P embossed with a figure next to it, 67. Here is an R in this rhomboid embossed with, and now it is getting complicated again, a 93 and an 87. One is red, one is not red. And here on the bottom we have the R plus MG, what is only, for room reasons probably, called MG here. This would be the R plus MG rating with the magnetic drag brake. Here we can see only the red number, 125. I think underneath the lever there will be the white number for it. So what does this red number mean here on the car? We can use this red number if a device on the car that is called the rapid brake accelerator, Schnellbremsbeschleuniger, is actually working. If it is working, we can use the red number, the higher number. If it is not working because it is broken or whatever, then we have to use the lower number. Again, we need to know the setup of our wagons, of our cars, to actually know what number to put into our calculation. Yeah, guys, I hope I have not lost you so far. One more slide, and then we will go back to train driving a bit before we get to the second part of the presentation later on. We are still determining what figure for the braked weight we put into our calculation for every and each vehicle, depending on the setup of the vehicle and the setting of the brake equipment on the vehicle, the locomotive, or the car. And the last thing that we still have to take into account is the load. Oh, unfortunately here I messed up my animation a bit. Now we're talking about freight cars or passenger cars, but in the aspect of how the brake performance can change as soon as we have a different load. If we are putting more goods in the freight cars, or if we are having more passengers in the cars or less passengers. For that, we have systems on the cars typically that increase the brake performance along with load added. This can happen in a manual load change, like on Z cars, these are those tank cars for example. You will find a device like this, a lever, a red lever, and a plate underneath it, giving you three figures. And how are those figures to be read? The figure below the lever, here 48, gives you the so-called changeover weight load. So if you are putting at least 48 tons of load into this car, then you have to switch the lever from left to right. And what effect does this have? Instead of only having a braked weight of 26 here, like on an empty car or a lightly loaded car, as soon as we are going beyond the 48 tons of load in the car, we're switching the lever over, and then we have an increased braked weight of 58. So braked weight for load lower than changeover weight is this one, and braked weight on the same car for load at least as high as the changeover weight is that one. Then we have to manually switch over the lever, and we have a higher effectiveness of the brake system. How does it work? We are increasing the brake cylinder pressure a bit by moving this lever over, and then we have more pressure on the brake pads, and then we have more brake force, and at the same time we can, for calculation of the Bremshundertstel, put in a higher number here. The same thing works with automatic load change. We don't have to switch a lever here, but it is more elaborate. You can see on a freight car that it has an automatic load change if you find a marking like this: Bremse, brake. It's a Knorrbremse Einheitsbauart. That is, the KE tells us who built the brake and what type of brake it is, what settings this brake can be set to, G and P, no R for example, and then interesting here this A, automatic load change. If you find that here, you know this vehicle has an automatic load change, and then the marking tells you that it has a braked weight of maximum of 58 tons, and the braked weight of this car equals the car gross weight, so the weight of the car plus the load up to the maximum automatically. So there is a mechanism in the car that weighs the load and translates it to a higher pressure in the brake cylinder, gradually so. So the brake weight will increase with the load, evening out more or less the effect of the load. And many modern freight cars have this. This is from the Ianos cars. This is from the SGMRSS cars here. Here we have the specialty that, you know, those S cars with the containers, the intermodal cars, they have two separate vehicles that are connected permanently so that you use them in pairs. And for being in pairs, they have two brake distributors. Each unit has its own, and so it is also a system that has an automatic load change, and it gives you the maximum of the pair and tells you that one part of the pair has a maximum brake weight of 36 and the other one of 72. And those markings you can find on a lot of modern freight cars, and they give you for this vehicle the brake weight when taking into account the load of it. So for freight cars you have that. On passenger cars you typically have an automatic load change, so that the brake weight gets more as soon as there are more people going into the vehicle. And so you end up with your brake weight for every vehicle in your train. And then you need to compose it into a train, because not always you are running a light locomotive, but sometimes, or most of the time, you're actually putting more cars to your train. And how do you calculate the braked weight and the brake percentage for the whole train? You add it up. You have the weight or the mass for each vehicle, like Dienstgewicht here, the figure on the left on the Vectron, for example. Now it is 85, it's a different locomotive, maybe. And then of each car. You just take the weight of each car, including the load, obviously. This is gross weight for the cars. And on top of your line, you will put the braked weight of each vehicle. And for that, you need to know what brake setting your vehicle is in and what effect the load can have on the brake weight. Just all the things that we talked about earlier. And the figure that you came up for each vehicle ends up here. So here, brake setting P, for example, will give you that number, or R even, don't know. And here, for example, we might have an automatic load change, so because the brake weight just fits the gross weight of the car. Here maybe the load exceeded the maximum of the automatic load change, so that we still have the maximum of 76 here only. And even if the car is more heavy than that, here we have a different situation where we are limited to 50 maybe, even though the vehicle is at 74. And here we have, these are always just examples, right? And then you add those figures up and you add those figures up and you divide the brake weight by the actual weight or mass of the train. And this you multiply by 100, round it down, and you have your Bremshundertstel for the train. You end up with 66 or 122 or whatever you end up with. So the idea is to first calculate for each vehicle the brake weight, taking into account the setting of your brake system on this vehicle and taking into account modifications by the load change mechanism on this vehicle. Put it into this equation and then calculate the Bremshundertstel for the whole train. And then you have the Bremshundertstel, weird word, right? The Bremshundertstel, or the brake percentage for a specific train. Komm da, see the radar. Nice to see you on the jet. On the night chat, maybe. And this happens not only this works not only for freight trains but also for passenger trains with the same idea. Calculate for every vehicle the brake weight by taking into account the setting and by taking into account the load change up to its maximum if it is automatic, or according to the load. For example, night chat, yes. Ooh, we've been talking about this before. And it also works for multiple unit. But for that, since you are not putting together the multiple units every time anew, you would typically have a fixed figure for the whole train, where this calculation already has been done. And so you get a fixed figure for the whole train that is never been uncoupled anymore. Is this the end? It is not yet the end, but almost the end. There can still be modifications to this due to the composition of the train. For that we go back to a freight train, because this is where this happens usually and more often. I have already said that we have to take into account on a freight train that we have to set the brake equipment to different values like G and P, so that we do not have those annoying forces inside the train that rip asunder the couplers or that bunch the cars together too much. So if we are talking about long trains and heavy trains, then we have to take into account the consist length. And this is consist, when I'm talking about consist, it is Wagenzug in German. This is the cars without the locomotives that are working. So only the cars, not the locomotive in front. And also the consist mass that we have to calculate. And for that we already know from the video about don't break it and unless it is fixed, that the mass of the consist is the main determining factor for the brake setup. Which brakes we are allowed to set to P and which brakes we have to set to G. So again, I invite you to watch this video and learn about that, how this works and where the limits are for putting all brakes to P and so on. So the length of the consist can be relevant, and the mass of the consist determines the brake setting on specific vehicles. And we have looked at this before. It can be G, P, and so on. Typically on freight trains it is only G or P. We are not allowed to set a brake to R on freight trains, even if it is there on the locomotive. On freight trains it is only between G and P typically, and we have to look at what our timetable is set out in. If the brake mode according to the Fahrplan, the timetable is G, or if it is P and R. And those figures here consist length and consist mass with reflecting on the setting, and the and what is set out in the timetable can lead to additional modifications of those numbers here. According to this table, if we have a brake mode according to Fahrplan G, or whether we have it to P and R, our settings in G we can only have brakes set to G. In P and R we can have vehicles with brakes set to P, but we can also have vehicles with brakes set to G. Again, watch the video about the brake setup, PZBM. Don't break it if it ain't fixed. If you want to know under what circumstances you have to set what brake to G and what brake to P. And then we have to look at the consist length here. If the Wagenzug, the consist, is not longer, or at least it is not exceeding 500 meters, then we do not have to make any changes unless we are running vehicles with brake setting G in a timetable that is set out for brake mode P and R, because then our brake on this specific vehicle is actually performing less effective than the timetable assumes. So if we are forced to put our vehicle brake equipment to G, then we have to subtract 25% just to make it sure, to reflect that the brakes set to G are less effective than the timetable assumes. And so it goes on. If the train is longer than 500 meters but not exceeding 600 meters, then we have to even modify brakes that are set to P in a P and R timetable, and still modify our G brakes. If the train is more than 600 meters, or the consist, the Wagenzug, but not exceeding 700 meters, this increases to a discount, or a decrease of 10% on P brakes in this train, and still G brakes are lowered to 25 or by 25%. And if the consist is longer than 700 meters, up to the maximum that is allowed at the moment under normal circumstances of 815 meters, then we even have to reduce the brake weight on G brakes in a G timetable, and even more P brakes on a PR brake timetable. And for the G brakes in PR timetable, those two things add up, the 25% plus the 5%, so it's end up with minus 30% on G brakes on a train that is longer than 700 meters and running under a P&R timetable. Sounds complicated. I think it is a bit complicated, but again, if you bend your brain around it, it can be done. So let's have an example for this. Let's say our consist length is 620 meters. The mass of our consist is 1,370 tons, and we have a timetable that is set out in P and R. The rules set out in my video, don't break it until or unless it is fixed, tell you that a train exceeding 12,000 tons but not 1,600 tons needs to be run in the so-called long loco formation, the LL formation, meaning that the leading locomotive and the next 5 vehicles need to be set to G. Again, this is stuff that has been treated in this video that I was always referencing here. So the lead locomotive needs to be set to G, and the first 5 vehicles typically, so here I only have the dots, so only the first 3 are represented here in my graphics, are put to G. The rest of the vehicles can be set to P. The idea is that the tip of the train is not braking too hard so that the rest of the train does not run in the tip of our train and causing derailments in the middle of the train. So we are just lowering the brake performance of the tip so that we don't end up with this situation. So what do we need to do now according to our table here? First of all, the locomotive is set to G. The first thing that we do, if you think back on the slide before with the Vectron, this blue thing, we have to pick out the brake weight that is given for G, no longer the one that is given for P, and then we have to subtract 25% because it is a vehicle running in G in a timetable that is set out in P and R. So we will have to lower this effectively. We have first to pick the lower brake weight for the G setting and then still reduce it by 25% because it is running as a G braked vehicle in a PR timetable. And for the next vehicles we have to do the same because they are running as G vehicles in an PNR timetable. But here, since typically those freight cars do not have different brake weights for P and G settings, we just take the brake weight that we calculated along or according to the automatic load change, for example, or the load change mechanism at all. But we still have to subtract the 25%. And for our P-braked vehicles, since the consist is longer than 600 meters, but not exceeding 700 meters, we still have to subtract the 10% on our P-braked vehicles. So those are lower too. And by lowering all the figures that are on top of our line, we are obviously lowering the overall brake percentage for this specific train. Okay. That is what I wanted to talk about today. We will have a look at the Excel calculator sheet that I made for all this again when we are actually coupling up to the train in Würzburg. And yeah, Spectre, was it something that cleared matters up a bit, or was it still too complicated and not graspable? For feedback on that, I'd be really happy about, because I think it is a complicated thing and you have to go one step after the other to actually understand what you're actually doing there and why you are doing it. Yeah, the idea was, how do I get to our brake percentage rating for the train over all the steps? Absolutely. Maybe a dumb question. How does the dispatcher decide what the timetable is GPR? That is actually an interesting question that I don't know myself. I think you can have for the same part of track different timetables that are set out in G and PR. For game reasons, I always use fixtures G timetable if by the rules given force me to set all brakes on my train to G anyway. Then I would use a G timetable because it allows me to go faster than on a P and R timetable. I've heard that it is even possible to request a different timetable. If you're handed one in P and R and one in G, you can request one as a driver or the other way around. And I think you would use a timetable that allows the train to go as fast as possible. So if you have a train that needs to be set out in G completely, then you probably would use a G timetable. Yeah, and the timetable will have the Mindestbremsung, the minimum brake percentage that is given on that timetable that it is set out in, so that you can compare the brake Hundertstel that we have calculated for our train and see if with your train you can go according to this timetable. Sometimes you have timetables that have different minimum brake percentages for different maximum speeds. How we get from the brake Hundertstel to the PZB mode and to a maximum speed in a gradient, I think I will discuss this in a second video. Today I wanted just to show the way how you get from the different parameters to the value, the Bremshundertstel value for your specific train. And I guess, but obviously I don't know that for sure, that a dispatcher would use the brake mode that enables the train to go as fast as possible within the applicable rules. So if we have to set the train to G anyway, then maybe we give him a G timetable. And I guess most of the timetables are actually set out in P and R nowadays, unless for very, very heavy trains. So Theodora says this in-front complexity is what intimidates most people from learning it. The will comes with time, I guess. Yes. Yeah. Then let's go on with our journey a bit. And we will couple in Würzburg to a train. And then we will do this calculation for the train that we are ending up with using the calculator sheet that I have actually pimped a bit, because the calculator sheet that has been published so far only uses one leading locomotive, and I had to rework it a bit, so I'm using a beta version. And then I will also show off OpenMinded's Bremszettel and Wagenliste add-ons to this tool, and those are really cute, because typically as a driver you would have two documents on your train. One is a list of all the cars that are in your train with all the braked weights and other information that is necessary to run the train, and also the so-called Bremszettel, the brake sheet, where you do all the calculations that are necessary. I will show that. Will I show it later or will I show it now? Maybe I just show it now, but it is not the one that I have open. So let's see, because it fits to what we have talked about so far. So maybe we start with that again. Can I blend in Excel here? Yeah, I guess I can. It is actually in a weird spot though, so I have to move it more to the middle. But it doesn't really want to go. No, I think it goes. Yes. So this is the brake percentage calculator and maximum speed calculator that can be downloaded from my Discord. And what OpenMinded did with it, he added this, and that is cute, isn't it? So this is the Wagenliste, the car list. Again, I need it more in the middle of the picture. Here. Can you see that here? Wagenliste. There is actually a header, and you get for your train number and for the driver of the train, and from you going from station A to station B, and then you have a list of all the cars. These are the car numbers and what car it is. Janos in this example here, because on the sheet here we have a setting with Janos cars, but we can also use other cars like the SGM RSS cars, and then it works here, and then you have that, and a lot of information like the length and the load, how they are loaded, how much load you have in the cars, and the gross weight, and then the brake percentage on setting P, for example. So if we had maybe a train with like loaded tank cars that we have to run in the long loco formation, for example, here long loco formation, then the first 5 cars will be set to G, And don't bother about the 0 here. This is another thing that OpenMinded has been working on. This is if some of the brakes are actually not working, so that you can switch them off. Can be done here. I will switch them on so to not confuse it, because we have to still verify that this is working correctly. And the first 5 cars, you can see the brake weight for G, and for P it has the different brake weight. And here you can also see where those cars are going, from what station to what station they are supposed to go. So this is what we, or OpenMinded more or less, has been working on, and I think this looks really cute. And you end up with a Bremszettel also, Bremszettel for the whole train, and here you can see what is the gross weight of the whole train for the consist Wagenzug, for the locomotives, and for the whole train. And here is the brake weight for the whole train. Here is the number of the axle, and this is the Mindestbremshundertstel flow, what you have been talking about, according to the timetable 58. So we have actually enough Bremshundertstel that is calculated here, more or less what we have done in the presentation, but in a form that would actually be used more or less like this in real life too. And then there is more information about what kind of brakes we have here, and calculations about how many axles are actually braked. And this is especially fun if some brakes are broken. Like in the game everything works, so this is an ideal thing in the game, but in real life sometimes brakes are not working, and it is not good to stop the whole train for it. If the brakes on one car is not working, so there are rules for how many brakes can be switched off for the train still be allowed to run. So Theodoro says, could be also from the load type. Fluid aggregate is typically heavy and shifts a lot, therefore G, shipping container down there. Yeah, this is also a thing that needs to be taken into account for the rules that tell you to what setting the brakes are set. And if you want to force the train to run in G, obviously, even though the rules would allow the train to switch some brakes to P, like for this stuff that is especially sensitive, like you say, then you can obviously order the driver to run the whole train in G by only setting out a G timetable. That is true. So I can already ease your mind that I am not driving this train back to Fulda as the scenario requires me to do on the stream tonight. I probably will just start driving it back to show the weird behavior of the LZB system and then call it a night, save the service. Maybe we go on next week with it. But what I still want to show is how to calculate in the game the applicable PZB mode and the brake setting from the numbers that you can find in the game by use of my sheet. But for that we need to get to Würzburg first. And at least we're running with 230 kilometers per hour. Doesn't look that far anymore. But if the LZB can be trusted, then it is still longer than 9.9 kilometers. What is AHA CD radar? Light engine, yeah. This is why we are going 230 here. Unfortunately, we cannot play the railjet with 230. Alright. Now LZB is telling us that in 7.2 kilometers we have to slow down to 160. But we can still go with full speed. The G indicator will light up, reminding us that we have to slow down. And I will actually slow down a bit then. I won't leave it up to the AFB to slow down the vehicle. Now it lights up. Slowing down a bit with the electric brake alone. A stop in 5.7 kilometers. You can normally see it on the speed clock what the AFB is suggesting. Here you can see the marker for the AFB slowly decreasing. And this is the brake curve that the AFB is calculating for you. So if you are staying below that, the AFB won't slow down the train. Because we are already doing this. Maybe TG will make the railjet as an add-on now that 4 airbag is out. That would be cool, but then they will have to fix some stuff on the on the Taurus. It would be a good opportunity to do so. Interesting that the LZB won't show the 160 at 9.9. That's what I expected, just at 7.2 kilometers. That is actually debatable if that would work like this in real life. Maybe not. So, we just passed the VR0 sign. Since we are running under LZB, we don't need to acknowledge it. We can just go along with the brake curve that is calculated by the AFB, or can even have the AFB stop the vehicle on its own. One problem though, when we are running under LZB and have the AFB slow us down in front of the red signal, we will see that in a very short moment. Is that AFB is calculating a brake curve that brings us to a standstill at a certain distance to the signal. She said Türfreigabe, that tells us that we are allowed to open the doors now. What we probably don't want to do, since we don't have passenger cars. So, see, I'm not doing anything now. I leave it up to the AFB to stop the train in front of the red signal. That is quite okay. The problem though is, you can see that the scenario objective indicator is not updating, because the objective marker is here and the AFB is stopping us here. So with the settings LZB on and the AFB on, we don't make it to the objective marker. For that I would turn off the AFB, and then we should actually be able to go a bit more and then stop in the objective marker. And now we are waiting in front of a red signal. The scenario wants us to contact the signaler. Okay, we can do that. And look what is happening. The signal is still red, showing both lamps lit, and it is showing a yellow, probably a yellow 3, maybe even a whitish one. Stop with 30 miles per hour. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that this is a valid signal in any German signaling system. And we are still in LZB, by the way. So, since we are in LZB, we don't necessarily need to respect the red signal. But normally they wouldn't show us a red signal when we're running under LZB. So what actually are we supposed to do in this situation? Are we now allowed to pass the red signal without doing anything? Because Befehl 40 is a thing that would work under PZB, but not under LZB. Let's see what happens when we pass this signal here. And I will just for security reasons, I will So what did it know? What did it do now, the train? It ended LZB without going through an ending procedure. It did not accept my Befehl 40. It went into G mode, switched to PZB, and is activating the Schnarre endlessly. How do we get out of this? I don't know if there is actually a proper procedure for that. We have now the G indicator and the 85 indicator for PZB on at the same time. Even turning off the whole thing does not do anything. Try to set the reverser to neutral. Yeah, see, it does not even do. Off, neutral. Can try to isolate everything. PZB isolation. CFA off. LZB isolation. So, what situation this is? If someone can explain that to me, that would be very interesting. When I played this scenario before, I did not end up with this. It actually accepted my Befehl 40, but I switched off the LZB before I went into this situation. So with LZB on, this is where I ended up. Maybe we can confuse the train by using the other cab. We can even turn on this cap here. We still have the Schnarre going on the other end. We have the G indicator lit up here. So I'm afraid this vehicle here is out of control. Lokführer needs to contact DTG support. Aha! Now at least the indicator is off, but this was maybe just because... No, it still lights up. It says Störung. Yeah, I think you can say that again. Well, don't know how it is done in Trains in World, but in SUSE you have to press Befehl 40 or the Freitaste if you pass the red signal. Well, I just pressed the Befehl 40 while running under LZB, then all of a sudden LZB was switched off, but we are still getting the G from LZB, so this is a mashup of both. So the worst thing that can happen typically when running under LZB and pressing the Befehl 40 taste should... Not even resetting the physics works. Okay. I'm afraid I'm not in a position to solve this here. So most probably we will have to do the coupling to the train next week. I will just get the train here, switch off LZB before passing the signal using the Befehl 40 and then actually couple to the train to not end up here. Not Siemens, not Deutsche Bahn, but DTG support. Yes. Okay guys, I will... Even on the external cameras, we still have the Schnarre going on. It is inevitable. Okay. Well, I meant to demonstrate a slightly weird behavior of LZB in this situation, but I guess it is a really weird Schnarcht by DTG. Yes. Well, then we will do this next week. Then I will have to do the drive to Würzburg again sometime during the week. But what we have seen today, or what we have tried to establish, is how we can calculate the Bremshundertstel for a specific train by first calculating the brake percentages or the brake weight for every vehicle in the train, taking into account the brake setting and the load on freight cars and passenger cars alike, and then also taking into account the consist length and the timetable requirements. So this is bad ending scenario in train sim world. I think it is a bad ending scenario because I can't think of any more how to reboot this train here. If it does not come off even when switching off the train completely, maybe it's the battery switch. Maybe if we switch off the battery. Oh, we should have switched the Bremsart to R, by the way, after running with 230 here. Führsteuerung, we don't really need that. Yeah, but even with the battery off, the train is still going crazy and schnarrt to death. Nothing is working anymore on the train here. Pantograph is down, the battery is down, but the Schnarre is still schnarring away. I think it's your phone ringtone at this point. Train line off, main circuit breaker open, pantograph lower in sand. Well, I'm afraid anything short of smashing those speakers here won't end this. Okay, I give up. I actually have to contact support here. Be it Siemens, be it Deutsche Bahn, or be it DTG. I will not get this train home anymore today. Well, yeah, okay, next week we will talk about what we can actually do with the brake percentage then, and how we can see how fast our train with specific Bremshundertstel value, how fast the train can go in a certain gradient and which PZB mode it can use, what also reflects on how fast the train can go between signals and what brake curve it is measured against when approaching a speed limit or a red signal. So unfortunately I cannot end this stream with calculating the things that we have talked about for the train that we are coupling to, but we will do this then in the beginning of next week's stream, I guess. Guys, thank you very much for bearing with me all the time. It was a complicated topic, I think, but it is, in my opinion, it is rewarding to dig into this a bit, to understand how this is supposed to work, as much as we as lay people can do that. Thank you for the stream, Tiger. Sorry for the Schnarre action. All right. Despite everything, it was a nice stream. Thank you very much. Yeah, I hope I lived up to what you expected, Spectre, from Bremshundertstel topic, and we will continue this next week. Thank you very much. Have a nice time. Take care, and bye-bye.